Cory, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Stephan. It's great to be here.
So, Cory, lots going on. There's been a lot of things. There's a lot of things we can chat about. Obviously, there's the world of VC and investment and what's going on in the Bitcoin world, as well as the world Bitcoin is going to create. And of course, we've got to chat about what's going on at Swan. But I wanted to start with what's going on in the regulatory, legislative world and the halls of power, as it were, because it seems to me like there's this whole crypto lobbying group, and then there's like the Bitcoin people, and you've also been commenting on this quite a bit. So I know you'll have some interesting thoughts to share. So what's your take there?
Broadly, what I want to make sure of, in as much as I can influence things at all, is that Bitcoiners don't take for granted that crypto people have Bitcoin and Bitcoiners' best interests in mind at all times. Sometimes their interests align, lots of times they don't. And I think we kind of saw that, flare up a few times this year. Just like obviously we saw this, with crypto people sort of having different views from Bitcoin people throughout the history of the Bitcoin space. It's going to be that way when it comes to regulatory, and you're going to see, the kind of the regulatory version of "I love Bitcoin, buy my shitcoin," and a lot of orange washing, as they say, trying to wrap yourself in the Bitcoin flag while promoting your altcoins or whatever. So you'll say like, well, you should be fine with us because, we're just like Bitcoin in this way, or something like that, right? And, I think it's just important that Bitcoiners separate themselves, which obviously some, people have been doing a good job of that, is saying like, there's Bitcoin and there's crypto, there's Bitcoin and there's shitcoin or whatever. That goes for dealing with legislators and regulatory agencies, et cetera, in the United States as well. We should, where it's necessary to have a voice, or where we choose that we should have a voice, I think it's important that there's actually Bitcoiners that do that talking and that tease out the difference between, Lightning, for instance, or proof of work mining, and some other thing that crypto people are trying to co-opt and sort of use for their own ends to keep their sort of giant Ponzi thing going.
Of course. And as you rightly pointed out, this has been a thing in the space around quotation marks, "I like Bitcoin, buy my shitcoin," right? And so I guess you don't necessarily have to name names, but I mean, what does that look like historically in the space? What kind of actions do those people tend to take, and what kind of lines of argument do they tend to use?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into the name calling and calling people out and things like that, because the fact is, like, in many cases, I actually believe that they think they're doing the right thing. This is some of the people that are actually like working in DC, and they've actually on occasion done very much the right thing for Bitcoin. But it's when their interests have aligned with what was good for Bitcoin and Bitcoiners that they've done the right thing for Bitcoin. And I think we see with all of the ESG narratives going out there, and so it may not be like the VC fund or the specific lobbying organization that directly FUDs proof of work and promotes ESG friendly proof of stake, or proof of something else that doesn't require energy and therefore is basically fiat. But they're funded by those people, and they're tied to those people, and they're at their events, and there's people on the advisory boards of these lobbying organizations, from those token projects, the non-Bitcoin stuff. And, it's a bridge too far to think that there's not going to be some influence. And, we've already seen, deliberate attempts to try to tie Bitcoin in buckets with crypto stuff for the purpose of legislation. And, I just think it's really important to get out in front of that. So I refuse to party down with the crypto people on the infrastructure bill last year. And I wanted Bitcoiners to take up their own fight. And, it seems like a lot of people were kind of spurred to action, and there's at least 3 or 4 new kind of lobbying efforts that are Bitcoin only, whether it's, Sat Center, There's a couple other ones for sure that are out there and kind of getting going. The one in Nashville and Sat Center is kind of a little bit more West Coast, but it's national, obviously, and has a bunch of participants. And I don't feel the need personally to get super involved. It's not my thing. I haven't done any politics for 20 years. But I'm really glad that there are Bitcoiners leading the charge and making sure that the things that get written, have the input of real Bitcoiners.
I see, yeah.
Not just people that claim to talk for Bitcoin.
Of course,
that claim to speak for Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's definitely a few parts in that. So it's this idea that sometimes, quote unquote, crypto people see Bitcoin as, Bitcoin is, you're just part of our broader industry, and you little Bitcoin people need to play nicely with the altcoins because, whatever reason. And, but to the point you were saying is that people have conflicted interests in some instances where maybe they've taken funds from a shitcoin VC or a shitcoin fund or something, and now they are a little conflicted. And then the other aspect of it is that some of the shitcoins will have marketing budgets, and they will market themselves by attacking Bitcoin. They'll say things like, don't use, we use less energy than Bitcoin. And so obviously that then takes a little bit of time to go and disentangle. Wait a second. No, there's a reason Bitcoin uses energy. And in fact, that's part of Bitcoin's strength. That's part of Bitcoin's neutrality. Yep. So I think that's perhaps part of that's the challenge for Bitcoin advocates and educators out there, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of many challenges out there, but I just think it's important to. Anyway, I think we've beaten this one to death. Sure.
Yeah. So I think that there's definitely that aspect of it, and I think it's funny with, like, even with all the venture capital stuff in general. Like, it seems to me like it's really going to change so much once as the world hyper Bitcoinizes. Now, of course, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know when. It could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and so on. And that's really going to change the world in so many different ways. And I think it will really change the way we invest, we act, we save, we spend, all of this. And actually, you touched on this in your recent piece for CoinDesk. It was The World Bitcoin Will Build. So for anyone who hasn't listened or hasn't read that one yet, can you just give a bit of a summary there for people?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the conceit was really, I wanted to present how I actually think of the future for purposes of, planning my own career, my company's path, and my own family's life and finances. So just kind of, this is actually what I think is going to happen, like the most likely outcome. That doesn't mean that it's 99%. It doesn't even mean necessarily that it's over 50%. It just means I think this is the most likely outcome of, if I were doing some kind of like Monte Carlo analysis decision tree thing, like I think this is how it's probably going to go more than any other way. And so we just took kind of, moments in time and, taking a look at like where we thought we'd be in 2035. And then again, kind of where we'd be in 2050. And, a lot of it's going to seem kind of familiar. So some of the fun is kind of in the details and kind of, digging into some of the language and some of the specific examples that I threw in there. So I do recommend reading it. But, broadly, I say like we're obviously still kind of early in the development of Bitcoin as store of value. But after you get, a couple more cohorts, so people that came in 2017 or 2018 and, they've been in Bitcoin for 8 or 10 years and maybe one more cohort. So at that point, let's say people that come in 2023, 24, 25, once they've held for 8 to 10 years, there's a good chance that lots of those people will have, over 90% of their net worth in Bitcoin. And somewhere in the, 2 halving cycles after the 2017 cohort and that 2021-ish cohort, I think there will be a lot of people around the world that want to spend Bitcoin. And you'll really start to see kind of medium of exchange reaching the level where we are kind of now with store of value. So Bitcoin will be really well established as a store of value, and we'll be looking at it as a nascent medium of exchange, you'll see a lot of people just demanding to pay for things in Bitcoin. And so an explosion of services from legacy companies that add Bitcoin services, much easier to achieve, venture scale revenue profiles for startups in the next, from 5 years from now into the next decade, for people working on medium of exchange. And so this kind of results in something that I've been saying a lot, but never actually put in an article, which is that I think after MOE, then you're going to have kind of prices on price tags for goods and services on the internet and in stores or whatever. You're going to have sats on those price tags in most places around the world for most goods and services. And I think that'll be really exciting too. So basically, I sum it up by saying, like, by the year 2035, you'll be able to buy most goods and services around the world denominated in sats. It doesn't mean that will be the only price. There will probably still be a dollar price and maybe like another local currency or something like that, but you'll be able to pay for things in Bitcoin, pretty much most places around the world by 2035.
Right, and that's obviously a far cry from where we are today in 2021, where maybe you need to use some in-between way, like, say, Bitrefill, or you need to basically sell some sats or borrow against it, and that, etc. So I guess that's that aspect of it. And I really believe we're going to see big shifts in just the way financial services operate, right? We will see potentially community banking, and we might see, obviously, self-banking, right? Set up your own node and your own keys, all of that. And it might be more like each family sets up their own node and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see that whole gamut of options there that's out there. So that's really interesting as well. And I think the other part is just that broader shift, and I mention this all the time, is like that shift between debt and equity. And I really do believe we're going to be shifting a lot more into like an equity-based world. And so what kind of ramifications do you think that has for, say, an investor?
I mean, it's not going to change my world that much because I've been an early stage guy for so long. In fact, other than dabbling in some public equities here and there a long time ago, I've been focused exclusively on kind of angel investing at the seed A, maybe B round stage for a decade now. So it's not going to change what I do much. I do think that there's just going to be this massive explosion of new things that we've never thought of before. And that's what I'm really excited to see. I'm excited to see, value for value media explode. I'm excited to see, messaging over Lightning, almost anything that relates. It's just so early. It's hard to conceive of, right? Because we just don't know what's going to be practical and possible as the infrastructure gets better. And, people just build on top of pre-existing innovations, and, everybody benefits from all the stuff that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. It's going to be really exciting. I'm super bullish on getting in as early on as many of these things as possible. As you know, I mean, you're my partner in Bitcoiner Ventures, and, I wish we had more time to cut more checks, but at least we've gotten 5 deals done. And I'm looking at other stuff, when I have the time, which is not often. But super bullish. I mean, we're obviously laser focused on onboarding people into Bitcoin with Swan. But I have a background in payments long ago before getting into Bitcoin in my like consulting and private equity work. And I'm super bullish on this stuff. It's just really, really early. These companies are really small. They have tiny revenue. I don't think there's maybe any of them that are actually making money other than the ones like that are working in like probably Bitrefill and Paxful that are kind of have hit scale. But there's been so many good, promising young entrepreneurs starting sort of, let's call it like MOE businesses in the last couple of years. And some of them are going to take off. They're going to hit, and they're going to be really big, and they're going to be in a good position. And even when the legacy companies get around to it, they're never going to understand the advantages to building on Bitcoin and building on this monetary network the way that the native Bitcoin companies do. And a startup already has massive advantages over any project team or product team at a big company because those people just don't care. Not going to put in the hours. They're not going to be thinking about the problems on the weekends or like taking their kids for a stroll in the park. Only the people working on startups actually have that kind of creativity to do that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really bullish on Bitcoin companies over the next decade.
Right. And so for some of them, it may be that they take some time to come to fruition, maybe a few more years until the market size is big enough to actually make that a workable company. And some of them might be more infrastructure related or security related and things like that. So those are different ones out there. So any listeners out there, if you're interested, you can check it out. It's bitcoinerventures.com, and we've got a Telegram chat room as well for people to share ideas and get access to some of the companies that we've got.
Yeah, I mean, just to put a little meat on the bone there, I mean, when we started in 2020, like the very first deal we did was probably the best known company that we've done a deal for. But because we only had like 50 to 70 LPs, we were like, I was basically calling people and having to like rope people into it. And it took, 5 or 6 weeks to do a check for like 200 grand or something, versus, I think, Galoy, we raised that entire round in like 4 hours. We just did a deal for a great Bitcoin startup. And it's just getting easier and easier because we have, I think, 450 or 460 LPs now around the world on the AngelList syndicate, and other syndicates know us and will send people our way. Like if they didn't do the deal, they'll just, send our deal to their people, that kind of thing. So it's getting easier and easier. And I think it's really important to have, there's so many benefits to having like 100 people around the world who are super fans of your product that now get to own a piece of it and tell their friends about it and, join your alpha test group and your beta test group and all that kind of stuff. It's just it's a really nice ad. It's kind of the same pitch that you would get for crowdfunding, but it's better because these are like real Bitcoiners that are actually cutting like a decent sized check, not just buying your album or something.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool way to think of it. It's almost, we're seeing a popularization of that even with the likes of Kickstarter and things like that to fund a book project and things like this. But obviously you're getting equity in a company here. So it's a different ball game here. And I'm also curious your thoughts as well, because you came from that world as well. The question around getting access into some of these deals, like maybe historically Bitcoin companies were sort of crying out for capital. Do you think it'll reach a point where it might be difficult to get into the deal because you need to know someone or you need to have the right access?
Yeah, I mean, it already is. I mean, there already are hot deals that people can't necessarily get into if they're not paying close attention or don't know somebody. I mean, that's how it happens. Some of these are happening really, really fast, and are getting like big chunks of the round taken down by one investor or something like that. So I think we're already kind of there. There wasn't 2 years ago, there wasn't a single Bitcoin only fund. I think Folger has become Bitcoin only, but they were looking at other stuff a couple years ago. And I think Elise at Stillmark maybe wasn't just super public, even if she was doing it already. Like, I don't think we were all kind of aware of her efforts 2 years ago. So, when we started Bitcoiner Ventures, there wasn't a committed capital fund focused exclusively on Bitcoin. Now there's like 1031. There's the Bitcoin Venture Fund with Chris Calicott and Dustin Trammell and that team. Obviously, Elise has made a huge splash and is like the queen of ass kicking on stage when she talks about Bitcoin. And I think there will be more Lightning Ventures, which is, working on committed capital, but doing syndicates right now, at least. Plan B Ventures with Han Hua is a syndicate on AngelList that's been doing a bunch of deals in basically every good Bitcoin startup that's raised lately. So that's pretty cool. The future is bright. The future is orange, and we'll see more and more capital committed here. But, the numbers are staggeringly small compared to, crypto VC funding. There's, 21 billion deployed just this year for crypto stuff. And I think about 35 billion of LP capital across all these like Andreessen funds and, whatever else is out there, Paradigm and all these guys. And that's who's sort of working with these lobbyists and drafting legislation and kind of doing all that stuff. So like they got a lot going on. And it depresses me sometimes to see that, let's say 700x multiple versus the Bitcoin only funds that probably have about $50 million of committed capital. But we have like the better product by far, the one that matters. We have way more, diehard supporters and fans on Team Bitcoin than all of the rest combined, by at least an order of magnitude, if not two orders of magnitude. Like nobody's going to the mat and like dying for Solana or something, right? Nobody actually cares unless they're making money today, unlike Bitcoin. So it's good. And the other thing that puts me at ease is that massive companies work with Bitcoin. And so you don't necessarily need the VC funding if it's really important to Square and it's really important to, payments companies like Visa and MasterCard and, investment banks that, have groups that see the light or whatever, like Morgan Stanley supplying capital to NYDIG that they can then use for Bitcoin-backed loans at Unchained or something like that, right? Like that's something that's actually happening and is a big deal. So,
yeah. And speaking of, NYDIG had a big one recently. I think it was $1 billion on a $7 billion valuation. So
they just raised 1 on 7, which is amazing and huge. As exciting was this morning, Ledden's announcement, like
Bitcoin mortgages,
massive valuation, almost $500 million valuation, I think, or maybe slightly more than that. Like, was I sleeping on Ledden? That's huge. It's amazing. Anyway, it was so funny. Mario texted me this morning, or DM'd me this morning, and he was like, "What do you think about having, one of the Ledden co-founders on Swan Signal Live?" And I was like, "Sounds great. Like, just hit up Brady." So humble, so nice. Didn't send the link. I didn't find out about the fundraising for like 4 more hours, and then I was like, "Brady, yeah, you just get those guys on immediately."
Yeah, I mean, I saw it as well, and I was like, okay, I need to get them on, get one of the guys on to talk about, Bitcoin mortgages and stuff. It's really interesting as well to see the growth in the space, and I mean your comments as well around kind of the crypto world versus Bitcoin world, and it is in some sense a bit, I guess, sad or unfortunate or weird that like the world doesn't kind of see this yet. But in fairness, it's also, I think a lot of the crypto stuff is really a lot of it's leverage play and gambling sort of related things. And you know what? Maybe for now that's more popular than just saving with Bitcoin. And of course, in the future, medium of exchange, directly spending things, etc. But I really do think it will bear out over the long term, and people will look back and think, yeah, you know what, the Bitcoin position, the Bitcoin only position was really essentially correct about a lot of these aspects of where the market was going to go. And okay, look, maybe fine. It depends if you count like stable coins and whatever as, is that not Bitcoin only or whatever. But I think essentially the future is going to be Bitcoin only, and maybe some stable coins as kind of like a bridging aspect of it. That's high level how I'm seeing it. What do you think?
I mean, seems like nobody ever checks in a stable coin. It seems like once they're minted, like I've never seen the Tether market cap go down. Does anybody ever cash in Tether? I don't know. And like, what's the other one? Circle's coin, USDC coin. Like it's massive. It's like $40 billion now. I just did it myself. I added up. I only went down to like the top 50 just looking for the stable coins and in the actual asset backed ones, not like DAI or something like that. And it was $156 billion in the top 5 or 6 kind of actual asset backed stable coins. Pretty funny if the dollar if the crypto dollar like flipped ETH.
That would be cool to see. And I think it's just growing at a phenomenal pace, right? So I obviously would prefer the world just hodl Bitcoin and we all just go straight to Bitcoin.
Well, Stephan, before you go further on this, I think it's actually a bullshit crypto fund and crypto founder narrative that the dollar is this medium, the crypto dollar is some medium of exchange thing, that stablecoins are going to be this big MOE thing. It's not. It's just leverage trading. That's all it is. It's crypto traders. It's because they're fiat minded and their unit of account is dollars, and they're going to use stablecoins for all their trading activity. That's it. And DeFi is all run on dollars, but this has nothing to do, like, it's not like a bunch of people in Turkey are hoarding stablecoins. They're not.
Right. Yeah.
Like, they're getting dollars when they can, actual US dollars, or they're buying real estate
Yeah, yeah.
or Bitcoin.
Actually, let's touch on that as
they're
well.
not.
I know you
Yeah.
obviously, you go spend some time in Turkey. Your wife is Turkish. You obviously
Yeah.
have Turkish friends and associates. And you were chatting a little bit about the inflation story there as well. Do you want to shed some light or give us a little bit of color on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I occasionally tweet about it, just because I sometimes have things that are relevant for a Bitcoiner audience on Twitter that I know about, or just hear stories from friends over there or whatever. But so yeah, when I first went there in 2010, it was I think it was 1.7 or 1.8 lira per dollar. It was 14.83 today. Lira per dollar, and yesterday it was like 13.8. So I think this is the first time it's jumped like a full lira, adding like 13.8 to 14.8 in a day. So it's pretty runaway. It was sub 10 32 days ago. It was 9, a month and a couple days ago. It was 9, and now it's 14.8 or something. So we're watching it in front of our eyes, and it's a really large economy. So certainly there's never been anything like this since the birth of Bitcoin. It's the number 17 economy. It's 80 million people. Istanbul is bigger than, 115. Just the city of Istanbul is bigger than 115 countries, including like Portugal and Greece and Norway and like all these European countries. Like Istanbul is bigger than that, just the one city. And, they have every industry that you can imagine. It's the second largest exporter of TV entertainment behind Hollywood globally is Turkey, which is crazy, behind the US. So it's a lot of people. It's a lot of diverse stuff. I mean, shoot, like half the food products in Trader Joe's are from Turkey. Like, I think there just has always been like a nice connection between Germany and Turkey for trade reasons. And then I think Trader Joe's was started by the son of one of the Aldi founders, which is a big German chain, if I recall. So maybe that's kind of the genesis of that back through the years. But I mean, so these they've been through it before, but not this generation. They had multiple of these in the 80s and 90s, at least 3, I think, major devaluations. My when my wife used to go back to Turkey, she actually grew up outside of Turkey for the most part, but she would go back in the summers, and her mom would have to tell her whether to add like 1 0 versus last year or like 3 zeros versus the year before. And she was really buying gum for like millions of lira in the 90s and stuff like that. So she's seen it before, isn't really that fazed by it. How they cope mostly is if you have any excess assets. They do own a lot of gold in Turkey, but they're also just like they store it in real estate in Turkey and outside of Turkey. And so, I always make the joke like Turks are used to stacking flats. So stacking sats is not a far cry for a Turk. They're used to stacking flats.
Yeah, right. It's a really interesting perspective. And so, I mean, from what I've read and seen in high inflation scenarios, it becomes like hot potatoes, right? That's like towards the later stages, people just try to spend straight away. But before that, people are looking at stock market, property, even art and gold, and they tend to just try to buy those things and hold those to save themselves.
Yeah, they do. And it just has so many other disruptions too, So like, I put a couple of these in a thread, and I want to add to it as I come up with more examples, or people send me things and kind of make it one of those threads. So if you just search my handle and Turkey, there's 5 or 6 things in there. I'll keep adding to them as we watch this, because this train is not going to reverse. It's going to be worse and worse, and I think we'll be at 50 lira per dollar in a few years if it's still around, unless it hyperinflates. But one example was a friend of ours worked for a Turkish company, and she was doing great, and it was like career track, blah, blah, blah. Inflation goes nuts. They can't give her a raise to keep up with it. A European company steps in that's a competitor to the Turkish company, and it doesn't cost them anymore because their balance sheet is in euros, and they just offer her the same salary they would have last year, but it's a 50, 60, 70% pay bump for her. So she jumps, and the Turkish company is now disadvantaged and lose that skill, right? We're actively poaching Turkish employees from spectacular companies when they're paid in lira and paying them in dollars. We've got, one engineer and hoping to add another one here soon. It makes sense. Like, that's just how the world works. So
yeah, the brain drain factor, and just, I think there are lessons for all of us anyway as Bitcoiners in looking at what happens in high inflation countries, because obviously we're Bitcoiners, we're very concerned about inflation, and so I think there are lessons to be learned out of looking at what goes on, and so that's important to see. And you might maybe eventually you start to see importers having problems, right? Because now they used to be able to buy something denominated in US dollars, but obviously as the lira just keeps tanking and their revenue, their income is in lira, well, now they're struggling to get their imports in, right? And so then people in the country now might be struggling to get the products and services that they normally are used to being able to get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you try to control the inflation with price controls, which is like the road to tyranny. You blame the bankers, and you try to make sure that people can buy the smits, which is like the daily pretzel or whatever. And, try to keep that at 1 lira or whatever it is so that people don't notice. But basically what happens by trying to keep these prices low, it's artificially low. And so Bulgarians have been driving across the border with like huge trucks and buying up everything. And now it's causing food shortages.
Oh, sad. Yeah.
Right. And then you've got basically almost every rental is rent controlled to some degree. So it might not be like, 1% or whatever it is in, certain pockets of New York where the millionaires live in 2 bedrooms and stuff. But, there's some degree of rent control on basically everything. And so you have people that just can't leave their apartment. They can't go because you can't afford the market rate, because they can charge the market rate when it's a new tenant. So people are just stuck. They can't change jobs. Like if they have a job offer on the European side and that commute is an hour and a half because they live on the Asian side, remember it's split half and half basically. And people, try to minimize the number of times they have to drive across the bridge or hop on a ferry. You'd rather, if you can, live and work on the same side. But you can't move. So now your prospects are chopped in half because you can't move to the Asian side if there's a new job offer over there, because you can't leave your house because you can't afford a new one over in Bada Jadesi or whatever the nice neighborhood is on the Asian side. So it just starts causing all this friction, and it just slows everything down, and the capital allocation is all messed up, and your life gets all messed up, and you can't travel, and other countries start to like mess with your passports because you just aren't like as good a trading partner anymore. And, little by little, the places that you can go and do things just starts to reduce, and I've got a lot of Argentinian friends and have kind of watched that country, my whole life for whatever reason. I've just always been kind of aware of things that have happened there. But, they haven't had a big one since, kind of 20 years ago. It was kind of a blip, another one kind of after that, but not really since '01. And, the Cyprus crisis was like such a tiny little country. So like we were all kind of aware of it, but nothing like this, nothing like a top 20 economy with 80 million people.
Yeah, it's shocking to see, and definitely some lessons out there for Bitcoiners out there. And I think, I like to think a lot of the savvy Bitcoiners are those who are learning about this and using Bitcoin, obviously, as an important tool to protect themselves and retain access to, say, products and services, or get freedom by getting out, let's say.
Yeah. I would say, like, just in case you are Turkish or have friends in Turkey, Turkey is one of the places where a lot of the intelligent class actually doesn't speak English. There are a lot of people that, because it's such a big economy, they can choose to just speak like Turkish and German or Turkish and Arabic or just straight Turkish, because you can have a really good career and not bother. But, you need some Bitcoin and you need to be able to speak English. Like, it is the international language of business. And I think it's a good hedge. It's a good hedge. I wish that I had encouraged, some of the friends and spouses of some of our network to go harder at it, over the last 10 years, because I foresaw that and I've suggested it, but I never like really beat the table for it. And it would be so much easier for them to just like grab a job with a Western company and work remotely and be making like, dollars or pounds or something if they spoke English. Anyway, I think that's a really important thing if you're in a country or you're a citizen of a country that, inflation is one of the possibilities over the next 10, 20 years. Like, just start now.
Yeah. And just bringing you back to, we were talking a little bit about leverage and people who are, and perhaps that's what drove this recent drop. So there was a high, futures open interest as an example. So potentially a lot of people were having hubris or starting to feel that sense of, oh, I can't go wrong. I'm just going to lever up on Bitcoin or one of the cryptos, so to speak. And so that's really a shift in the mindset, or at least being a stacking Bitcoiner versus the sort of crypto leverage type of person. And so I think that also bears out in what we see in some of the Bitcoin platforms, right? So for example, like Swan as a platform, what was going on the Swan platform at that time? What was the buy percentage?
Oh, I mean, we're always like 99.99 or 100 because you have to call us or email us to be able to sell. So yeah, I mean, I think I think less than 1 in 10,000 trades all time have been sells. So yeah, that's a pretty easy metric. But yeah, I mean, people stack the dip crazy hard. It's been really good business. Bitcoiners know a good deal when they see it. Obviously most of our users have a DCA plan where they're kind of automatically stacking every day, week, or month. But, you can also smash buy. And, it turns out a lot of these people aren't all in. It turns out that they actually do have some fiat on the sideline for buying dips. So, yeah, it's interesting. We do really well when the price is down. That falls off if the price goes sideways for a long time after going down. We prefer it to like go down and then back up again for our volume. But yeah, I mean, it's I certainly feel fortunate to have come into a little liquidity myself and being able to pick up some Bitcoin, sub 50K. It's crazy that feels really cheap now, by the way. Like, oh my God, it's less than $50,000 a Bitcoin. It's super cheap. Oh my gosh. That's, a couple of years ago, that would sound pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. And I am also, I think there are times where you see family and friends who get caught up into this idea of trading. And I think that's such a 99.9% of people will fail at this, or maybe 99%, but still, it's just insane how many people. And I think it's like this human psychology thing where they just think, oh, I can trade this thing, I can make money out of it. And it's just like, for some people, they can lose a lot of money if they're really not careful, and because they come into it with this idea of a trading mindset that they're going to try to dance in and out rather than just humbly stacking. So that's something I've seen, and I think it is something to make sure we're talking about that when we're teaching people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways I've had a lot of success with this framing this year, which is like whoever you're talking to, it's like, let's assume that you've gotten to the place where they kind of like they'd like to have more Bitcoin, and they're thinking about using trading to get there. And it's like, well, trading is a profession. Right? It's something that people can be really bad at or they can be really, really good at. And people who are really good at it work at it really, really hard for a long period of time. Like you get good at trading. There's science to that. There's a science and an art to being a really, really good trader. And traders that have been trading for 15 or 20 years are much, much better than people who have been trading for 15 or 20 months. Right? And so if this is going to be your vocation, your profession, fine. Cool. But if all you want is more Bitcoin, then you shouldn't just pick the thing that's like right adjacent to Bitcoin. You should look at the universe of ways that you could make money and think about, what's actually sustainable and what are you likely to be good at? Because most people are not going to be good at trading. Like that's just a fact. And it's not even necessarily that you don't even have to say like, oh, you couldn't be good at trading. It's like, you're probably not going to stick with it for 10 or 20 years to get really good at trading. Like, I'm friends with a lot of these guys that are good at trading because it was like my professional and social circle in Chicago. The last time there was getting this good was like the options trading boom when options went online and were open to retail, and the people that really knew what they were doing were just doing it with black boxes, and they would make fun of click traders. A click trader is someone that actually uses their hand to click a mouse. Like a good trader would never actually be a click trader. They make fun of those people. And a lot of those people are now in crypto, and they're running the desks at Jump and Cumberland. Most of these firms, are either in Chicago or have huge offices there, or they're in New York, and it's a bunch of ex-hedge fund guys, and they're people that know what they're doing because they've been doing it, for 20 years. And they have incredible machines and AI scientists and ML people, and they're setting up algorithms, and they're ripping your face off. And like, if you don't know any of what I'm talking about right now, and you aren't friends with those people, like, you're the mark.
Yeah.
So I just think people are just like incredibly naive going into it and thinking that it's going to work out for them. And it's almost a curse if they win a little bit early on, because it could just like ruin you for the next 5 years or the next decade, because you're just looking for that hot streak again. There's almost nobody gambling in Vegas that didn't win a lot in their first year.
Yeah, right. That's an interesting way to put it. Because
right?
sometimes...
Because if you lose a lot, you get turned off.
You just leave straight away. You got a bad taste in the mouth, okay, I'm done with that, never doing that again. But if you win a little bit, you sort of think, oh, maybe I was just getting unlucky those times I lost, and actually I'm skilled.
Vegas is fun.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I've got a system. I know I can beat the craps table. I've got a system.
And the thing is, so there's this whole industry spawning around it of, people teaching you how to trade, and the exchanges who kind of encourage, oh, hey, let me show you how to do a leverage trade, and oh, look at this, you can do a stop loss here, and you can and people get it into their mind, even if they're not a professional, right? That they're not doing arbitrage across exchanges using some kind of automated system. They're not using some kind of sophisticated approach, or maybe they're not being a market maker who charges a spread, and that's your professional trading reason that you're doing trading. Mm-hmm. And there's like an actual business model around it. It's just people who are just kind of looking at random crayon drawings from some influencer on Twitter and thinking, oh, look, see, it's going to go up, I'm going to go long now, or whatever, and then people just get wrecked. But hey, I guess some people just have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny though. Like I don't even come across this particular conversation that much anymore. I really don't. I think that, maybe it's just because my own efforts and brand have just, encircled myself with people that aren't about trading. And I think, Swan, through our, the megaphone that we've built, is just catching enough people and getting enough people to come to us who really see Bitcoin as a long-term savings technology. And so the conversation is just like basically about how much to buy.
Yeah.
That's really the one. I mean, you've been on a lot of these calls. Like, mostly people are just trying to figure out, how much of their portfolio to allocate to Bitcoin. And they're kind of just looking for reinsurance that the government can't ban it tomorrow. And, some of the usual FUD busting stuff that you just got to go through. But, I'm not really having this conversation much anymore unless I go on a crypto YouTube show and spread the word behind enemy lines, which I love to do. Shout out Altcoin Daily and Crypto Wendio. But went on both of those shows in the last couple of weeks. And it's actually quite fun. Like, they're nice people trying to make a living, whatever. And, you can still come with your Bitcoin message. And then the most fun is like, they get insane number of views and comments on their YouTube, right? Because all these crypto kitties are just like on YouTube all day, and just going and, showing up, because I doubt the other interview subjects actually show up in the comments, and I'll go through and answer questions and do retorts and, tell them that, ADA is fake and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
It's kind of fun.
That's great. And certainly I agree with you. A lot of the people who you've spent time teaching, they don't kind of go into this whole, can I be a trader and stuff. But there are maybe people who are more on the periphery, or people who are just coming in and they sort of see this stuff, or you might have, things like that. But I want to switch it now to chatting a little bit more like a macro stuff and what's going on in the world with, obviously, the Fed there's been some
Yeah.
talk about potentially, tapering off the asset purchases and, but there's always this argument of, are they just jawbirding? Are they just trying to say they're going to raise the rates, but then really they might not? Do you have any thoughts on what's happening with the Fed there?
Well, I mean, Jay told us today that the economy is fine, so we're good to go. And so they can stop. The Fed can stop buying all the bonds, and they can raise rates 3 times next year. So that's good. I'm glad we solved the crisis. This is fantastic. All clear skies from here. They got it under control. So yeah, all hail. It's great. But no, I mean, we're recording on the 15th of December, and the meeting was today, and there were some comments and stuff like that, and that was the message that was relayed, was going to try to raise rates 3 times next year. I can't imagine that it would go any better than last time, really. Like, there's probably some massive choke up either before or right after the first one. That would be like kind of my base case. The plurality of outcomes in your your possible scenarios would probably point towards something like that, and not being able to get through 3 hikes. But who knows, man? I don't know. I mean, it's all short-term stuff anyway. In the long term, dollar's in the toilet already, and it's about to go down the drain completely. And, Bitcoin's awesome. So
for sure. Yeah.
It's much easier to be just sort of sanguine about this stuff. I think about it a lot more in terms of like roadmap for, Swan and portfolio companies that I have like in and outside of Bitcoin, and just kind of charting a path for like when things will be hot, and making sure you load up on, cash for your next couple of years of operations, when markets are hot and things like that. So, I guess, this incredibly overheated equities market of 2021 has been, incredible for all stock investors, basically, especially in tech. And then it's been great for Bitcoin companies too. Like, we've benefited for sure, from there being like lots of cash around. The world's awash in liquidity. Going to try to describe a visual meme here that I saw on Twitter yesterday or the day before, and it was one of those things where like somebody's explaining something to somebody else. It was just a 2-panel one, and it was like, so how does trickle down work? Well, first of all, you print all the money and you give it to the 1%, and then there's like a blank panel, and they're like, and then the person's like, and that's it.
This is the world today.
That's it. Yeah, you just print the money and you give it to the 1%, and they're good to go. So yeah, I mean, it's just inflating these asset prices like freaking crazy. So I'll give an example. So I used to work with a lot of software as a service companies post Google, before getting into Bitcoin, and it was very typical to do deals at like somewhere between like a 6 and maybe a 10x revenue multiple. Would be kind of like where you'd anchor, and then you'd say, oh, but our growth rate's higher and our team's amazing. Or they'd, hammer back at you and say like, well, that's a first time founder and you guys only grew, 2x over the last year, and, keep you down towards 6 or something like that. It's very typical right now to do a SaaS deal at 100 times revenue.
Insane.
And it's only 6 years later where I'm getting this like, 6 to 10x kind of range. That was like 2015, 2016. And it's very typical now that it's like 100x. So you can go be like a $500 million company listed on NASDAQ, getting out through a SPAC or something with like $5 to $10 million of revenue.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you really put it in those terms. Hey, and so it just shows how far we've gone in terms of the system and where it's going with the money. And to me, it just comes back to the government is not going to be able to make its payments if they let the interest rates go up. They're just going to have to keep the rates low, and that's probably the most important, most salient factor in this analysis. And so they may bluff that they're going to, or maybe they even do a rate rise, but they won't be able to sustain. And I guess that's how I'm seeing it. And so that's obviously bullish for anyone who's a Bitcoiner. You're hodling and you're looking for that long term. So I wanted to...
Yeah, I mean, even let's say they did do 3 hikes, and so you added 75 basis points to the Fed funds rate, like it's still damn near an all-time low from the last 5,000 years, right? So it's one of those things where they're like, like it's like a store increasing the price by $30 and then, discounting it 15% the next day. And, that's what they've done. Like they dropped it below the historic low and now they're going to bring it up to the historic low. It's only higher than the last year, basically.
Yeah. Even that is just a crazy level. It's just trying to fake a society having low time preference when really it doesn't. So that's obviously going to cause problems for the world. But so be it. Also wanted to chat a little bit about what's going on with Swan. I thought it was interesting as well with the recent launch, Swan Gifts, and it really brought it back full circle for me. And that's how we first started, right? This all started as Give Bitcoin. So
yeah, it was givebitcoin.io was the original product, and we were just trying to figure out how to do things at the intersection of Bitcoin education and selling Bitcoin, or getting Bitcoin in more people's hands, but making sure they understood what they own. And so, that first product was gifting, and we ran that for holidays of 19, all of 20, through the holidays of 20. And Swan had, been taking off basically all of 2020, and we made the decision to focus the whole team on just Swan for the whole year of 2021. But in the background, we still had like the code and the know-how to do gifting, and then we built like another little piece of technology for one of our integrations with a partner about 3 or 4 months ago, and we realized that actually enabled a really slick way to do gifting inside of Swan. The team just did a little sprint, and we got live, I think, yesterday, and relaunched it in time for if you got some last minute shopping to do and you don't want to go fight the crowds, you can just use Give Bitcoin. It's very easy. It's a good product for the US. I wouldn't bother with the gifting product. Probably outside of the US, you can certainly use Swan outside the US to buy Bitcoin for yourself. I think the gifting is a better experience just in the US right now. We'll see if we can do something better for y'all internationals.
That's it. Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah, it was just interesting for me as well, because that was how I think that was when you and I first met. It was under this kind of idea of Give Bitcoin, and so it just kind of came back, and really cool to see that.
So it was day one of the Bitcoin conference 2019 in San Francisco, and I met you, Jan, and Parker at the exact same time, within 3 minutes of each other, either right before or right after I presented the idea on the peer-to-peer stage. And I can't believe that I met all three of you guys like right away, and ended up working with two of you. And of course, being an investor and advisor to Unchained, and having like an actual relationship with Parker instead of just admiring him from afar.
So that's cool how it came full circle as well. And also the Swan Advisor Services recently launched as well. I think that's an interesting one as well, because it's like people in the advisor world sometimes might struggle to kind of do the Bitcoin thing just because of the way the structures and the ways things are. So it's almost like you have to create a structure for them to be able to talk about Bitcoin with their clients as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that you can just be kind of an extended member of the team for an RIA, which is in the US a registered investment advisor, or an FA, which is a financial advisor, very similar. And they have all kinds of dashboards and reporting requirements and, portfolio rotations. And so you kind of have to like listen to what they need and get to know them. And so we were doing this for like 5 months, maybe 6 months, like building the product, interviewing people and doing it like a software company would, interviewing FAs and like figuring out like what we need to build and stuff. And meanwhile, we were putting together our board of directors, which Lynn Alden is on the board, and along with Jan and I. And the fourth member was supposed to be Andy Edstrom. And he's, former Goldman guy. He's been running Westcap Financial. He is a money manager out in LA. He wrote the book Why Buy Bitcoin, which is, probably the best book. It's the only book by a financial advisor for that audience. And it is a really good book. Anyway, so we were like about to have our first board meeting, and Andy hit me up and he was like, so I think I'd rather join full time and just run Swan Advisor Services. And I was like, okay, when can you start? So yeah, I mean now like there's no requirements gathering. He just tells our team exactly what to build. Like he knows it all cold. He knows all the vendors, all the partners, all the hooks that you need. And so that's a much bigger bet for us. We have a bunch of, partners and owners of RIAs on the Swan cap table that have like a few $100 billion under management across them. So it's like we've got a lot of good, sort of alpha and beta customers to test this with and to get into it. But there's $100 trillion of assets under management just with RIAs in the United States. So it's a huge pile of cash. If we can go out and tackle that and get, 0.5% of that or something like that, like it's big money. It's a big deal for Bitcoin. And there's nobody else doing it Bitcoin only. There's other platforms out there in crypto. They all sit on top of Gemini and they all, have a mixed message, just like the crypto exchanges. They're there just to like buy whatever the advisor wants. And we want to be there for the advisors that are orange pilled, or that have orange pilled clients, but still need to deal with their financial advisor. And we're just going to get really well known in that community. Andy has a big platform. He writes in CoinDesk twice a month and goes on tons of people's shows, and he'll do a lot more of that. I can speak this language pretty well. And, I used to work in private client services for Morgan Stanley a long time ago. Terrence Yang, who a lot of people have gotten to know through Clubhouse and Spaces, that guy's a, former MD at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch, and he's a Harvard lawyer. Like this dude speaks to these people, the way they want to be spoken to. So I'm really bullish on that. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's a whole other, category, and we need to be out there trying to be involved in as many different areas that we can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can I just say, like, honestly, like we've got plenty of bandwidth to talk to people. If you are a money manager or you're someone that works with a money manager and you want to talk about this, like you can straight up email me, like cory@swanbitcoin.com. Email me. We'll have a chat.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll introduce you to Andy. We'll get it on. Let's do this. So
yeah, and I think
we don't know all of you. You're not all on Twitter, like, Jeff Ross and a few others are obviously active, and we know some of you guys, but a lot of you are probably not tweeting all day. You're probably busy.
Yeah, for sure.
But you probably do listen to Stephan.
But I mean, look, and there might be listeners out there, maybe if you've got friends and family who are RIAs and you want to get them onto kind of the Bitcoin only message, because remember with Swan and the Bitcoin only message, they're going to really learn about Bitcoin, right? Instead of, I think where if you go for the crypto platforms, you'll get this kind of message of, oh, see, all the coins are just like equities and you just need to diversify across the coins. Like that's kind of more like their view of it. Whereas if you come to a Bitcoin specialist platform, it's Bitcoin only. Bitcoin is the message. Bitcoin is the answer. So I think that's an important distinguishing factor.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you'll never understand any of this stuff unless you actually understand Bitcoin deeply. So,
yeah.
I prefer that you stay with Bitcoin forever, but at minimum, get started with Bitcoin.
Of course, yeah. And yeah, I guess, is there any other Swan stuff you wanted to touch on, or maybe some of the other community projects and things? If you got anything else you wanted to mention?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's always a good idea to plug Bitcoiner jobs. I think that has been a resounding success, probably 6 months in, or maybe it's not even that long, might be 4 or 5 months in. But, this was just kind of on a whim, just fortuitous. I had just been getting so many people asking me for help finding jobs in Bitcoin, and then obviously having a piece of a bunch of companies, and they always have hiring needs. And I started spending a lot of my time like trying to match candidates with companies and helping people. I have a problem saying no to things. Except for yet shitcoin. I'm good at that. But, I like to help people when I can. And a VC randomly introduced me to a founder who had a company that made it like a lot easier to stand up like a vertical focused job board than anything that I'd seen before. And you could just pay a SaaS fee for it. So I did it, and posted on Twitter looking for somebody to help me with it. Found Nathan over in the UK who was game and jumped right in, and he's a beast. And he actually comes, so he can code a bit, he can write a bit, he can design a bit, and he comes from like the HR people management world. So it's like, oh Perfect my God. Combo. So we started doing this just like on the side, just like asynchronously coordinating on Telegram and trying to get people to, you know, post their jobs there. And it just took off, and he was just such a good dude. Like we couldn't not hire him. So convinced him to come over and join Swan full time. And it made sense to, you know, fold the effort into Swan. But, you know, it's free, unlike, you know, companies paying $700 a month for Pomp's shitcoin jobs or whatever. You know, this is a Bitcoiner community resource, and, you know, anybody that you would think is a competitor to Swan, that's not how we think about it. You know, Team Bitcoin for the win. Like I help all these companies. We feature, you know, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's, you know, Strike, Level, River, Casa, Unchained, Galoy, like all these companies are posting there. Big companies are posting there now too, which is pretty sweet. And I think it'll keep expanding. We have profiles on there now too. So even if you're like an anon and you want to post your profile, you can do that, and you can get contacted like through the platform. So it's kind of two-sided now. You can post like a job seeker profile as well. So really excited about that. Everything else that's coming, there's a lot. Like there are a lot of things that we have coming out for Bitcoiners. I think Swan is kind of turning into a little bit of like, you know, a Bitcoiner focused company, even more than a Bitcoin company. It's just kind of our nature and what we find interesting and what we like to do. Like we like to hang out with Bitcoiners. That's why we hire all Bitcoiners, and all of our people around the world go to as many meetups and conferences as they can, and kick it on Twitter and Clubhouse and Spaces and Discord and Telegram with Bitcoiners all day, every day. And it just lets us be very close to the community and listen to like what people want and what they need. And because we have a really good team of builders on the product and engineering and design side that can put things together, and then we have like enough of a megaphone to spark something and enough of a network to get people to try things. I think that was kind of what happened with jobs, and I think it's going to happen with 3 or 4 more products that we'll be rolling out over the next 3 or 4 months. So stay tuned for lots more on that sort of like Bitcoiner projects from Swan.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting for listeners out there who are maybe struggling in your fiat job. You're feeling like it's a bit soul-sucking. Well, take a look, bitcoinerjobs.co. You might genuinely find a job that, even if it's like a slight pay cut, you might think, you know what, it's worth it for me and my own mental state to be able to work and chat and really feel that interaction and that connection of working in a Bitcoin company, which is really good. And the companies there are very strongly Bitcoin focused, Bitcoin principled. So you'll find a lot of opportunities there. So Cory, probably time to wrap up there. So if you got anything else, any other thoughts for people, as you know, maybe a good one would be, you know, there might be listeners out there who are sort of weathering the storm or feeling the drop. Do you have any thoughts for them on staying, you know, steeling themselves for the longer term with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I find that when the price is going up, I feel like I have to stay current on everything. And so when I was in my learning phase, you know, so like 2017 through like 2020, and, you know, I was devouring podcasts, but what I would find myself doing when the price was like down or sideways or whatever is I would take more time to go to the back catalog, because I didn't need to stay right on top of like everything that was going on right now. There's something about a price pump when Twitter is really noisy and like everything's super exciting on the podcast. And so you always are kind of like trying to stay abreast of everything in the now. And when the price is down or sideways, I think it's just, it's fun to like dive into the Nakamoto Institute, or, you know, I started a newsletter a couple of months ago called The Daily Bitcoiner, where the whole point is resurfacing really good oldies but goodies, you know. So we'll find, you know, stuff from like 2011, 2014, old YouTube videos and podcasts that have stood the test of time, and kind of resurface those. So I think that one's a pretty cool one. Cory.substack.com. Here Come Cory was taken. But no, I'm just kidding. But thanks, Greg. F you. Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the things that was a little different. I would try to like pick up books and stuff. So like if you haven't read Digital Gold from 2014, like read that. It's awesome. If you haven't read, I'm trying to think of the Block Size Wars, which BitMEX Research put out about 10 months ago, like pick that up. Obviously like imagine we were all tweeting all of Parker's articles as they came out when he did, 15 or 16 in a row in like less than a year. But like, there's probably people that got into Bitcoin in 2021 that don't even know that exists, So like look up, Gradually Then Suddenly Parker's series and read all 16 of them. There's probably people that like only know about VJ's book and never read the original article, I think that's kind of interesting. Or, just go and like search a podcast app for somebody that you enjoy and then go back and listen to the things that they talked about. Because, like a first album, a lot of times somebody's, first couple appearances is when you get, their life story and kind of like the insights that they've built up from their whole life. And then after that, most of the podcast hosts have had these people on and they don't want to retell the same story. And so all you're getting is this person's comments on like the new stuff. But what you really want is like the first time that Safety went on Stephan's show, something like that. Or you want like the first time that Brandon Quittem ever went on McCormick or something like that. So try to go find, the first one or two shows that your favorite Bitcoiner was ever on, because that's when you're going to really like get to know them as people a little better. Anyway, that's kind of some media consumption tips in as much as they work for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And it's a great point that a lot of the new people coming in might not have, seen the same material. And of course, it's just the way it has to be. But that's certainly an important point for them. So listeners, make sure you follow Cory. Cory, where can they find you online?
I like Twitter more than I should. It's awesome. I love Twitter. So Cory Klippsten on Twitter. You can also find me in any of about 48 Bitcoin related Telegram groups. I think I already gave my email address, so that's out there. But yeah, you actually can email me for anything that you think is relevant for Swan. It's Cory@swanbitcoin.com, CORY. So that's probably enough to get you started. Oh, I'm also like much more active on LinkedIn lately. So find me there. I'm trying to post every day about Bitcoin. So if you're like me and you're like a Gen Xer and you want to hang out on the Gen X network with me on LinkedIn, come say hi.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining me, Cory.
Yeah, thank you, Stephan. It's great.